The beginning of an unlikely journey. Marcus had never imagined his life would take such a profound turn when he applied for the position of a caregiver. He had always been a man of quiet strength and resilience, attributes he'd acquired through years of personal hardship and service to his community. Raised by a single mother in a modest neighborhood, Marcus knew the meaning of perseverance. But this new job, caring for a paralyzed woman named Evelyn, would test his limits in ways he could never have predicted. It was a crisp autumn morning when Marcus first stood before the grand Victorian house at the end of Willow Lane. The house itself, while magnificent, had an air of loneliness about it. Its tall windows, once likely gleaming with life, were dim, shadowed by heavy curtains. The garden, once meticulously maintained, was now wild and overgrown, as if nature had claimed it back in defiance of neglect. Marcus felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had heard stories about Evelyn, a wealthy woman who had suffered a tragic accident years ago, leaving her confined to a wheelchair. Her wealth had not spared her from the emotional toll of her condition, and over the years she had pushed away everyone who attempted to help her. Caregivers came and went, unable to endure her sharp tongue and icy demeanor. But Marcus was determined. He had a quiet belief that beneath her bitterness, there was still hope. He knocked gently on the heavy oak door, the sound echoing through the empty house. After a moment of silence, a voice called from inside. "It's open." Marcus hesitated for a second before turning the handle and stepping inside. The interior was as cold as the house looked from the outside, and not just in temperature. The high ceilings and grand furniture gave off an air of former grandeur, but the atmosphere felt sterile, almost lifeless. He found Evelyn in the living room, her wheelchair positioned by a large window that overlooked the garden. Evelyn didn't turn around when he entered. Her once vibrant red hair had now faded to silver, and deep lines etched her pale face, telling the story of a woman who had seen more than her share of pain. Without glancing his way, she spoke in a flat, emotionless tone. "So, you're the new one. What makes you think you'll last longer than the others?" The bluntness of her question didn't surprise Marcus. He had been warned about her defensive attitude, but hearing it firsthand was something else entirely. He took a deep breath and forced a warm smile. "I'm Marcus," he said, approaching cautiously, but not too close. "I'm here to help in any way I can. I don't have any illusions about how hard this might be." Evelyn finally turned her head to look at him, her eyes cold and calculating. "Hard? You think you know hard. You don't know anything about what it's like to be trapped like this, unable to move, watching the world pass by while you sit here useless." Her words stung, but Marcus refused to let them shake him. He had faced challenges before, and he wasn't about to back down. "I won't pretend to understand what you've been through," he said gently, "but I'm here to listen. And if you let me, maybe I can make things a little easier." Evelyn scoffed. "Easier? Nothing about this is easy, and nothing you do will change that." Marcus nodded, acknowledging her frustration, but choosing not to engage in an argument. "I'm not here to change your life overnight," he said, "but maybe, over time, we can find some small things that bring a little comfort." Evelyn said nothing in response, turning her gaze back to the window, her expression unreadable. Marcus knew this would be a long road, but he wasn't deterred. Days turned into weeks, and Marcus settled into his routine. He arrived each morning at the same time, prepared meals, and made sure the house was clean. Evelyn rarely spoke to him, and when she did, it was usually to voice some form of displeasure or critique of his work. But Marcus remained patient, responding with kindness and professionalism. He soon realized that the hardest part of the job wasn't the physical care Evelyn required, but the emotional distance she maintained. Her walls were high, and she had built them meticulously over the years, not allowing anyone close enough to see her vulnerability. But Marcus wasn't giving up. He believed that there was a person behind that tough exterior who was worth getting to know. One afternoon, after he had finished preparing Evelyn's lunch, Marcus noticed a set of paints and brushes tucked away on a high shelf in the corner of the living room. "Curious," he asked. "Do you paint?" Evelyn didn't respond immediately, and for a moment, Marcus thought she would ignore him altogether. But then she spoke, her voice softer than usual. "I used to. A long time ago." There was a heaviness in her words, a sense of loss that Marcus couldn't ignore. "It must have been something you enjoyed," he said carefully, not wanting to push too hard. Evelyn sighed, her eyes never leaving the window. "I don't have much use for it anymore. There's no point in painting when you're stuck in a chair." Marcus felt a pang of sadness for her. "Maybe one day, if you feel like it, we could try again. I could help you set everything up." Evelyn didn't answer, and Marcus knew not to push any further. He let the subject drop but made a mental note to revisit it someday when the time felt right. Over the next few weeks, Marcus continued to offer quiet support, never forcing conversation, but always ready to listen when Evelyn spoke. She began to accept the meals he prepared, and on rare occasions, she even thanked him. Her gratitude was often muttered under her breath, barely audible, but it was a sign that she was softening, even if just a little. One afternoon, as Marcus was cleaning up in the kitchen, he heard Evelyn's voice call out to him from the living room. "Marcus." It was the first time she had addressed him without a hint of irritation in her voice. Marcus quickly dried his hands and went to her side. "Yes, Evelyn?" he asked, keeping his tone light and open. She hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "The garden. It used to be beautiful." Marcus followed her gaze to the wild, overgrown mess outside the window. "I can tell," he said softly. "Would you like me to help bring it back?" Evelyn's hands tightened around the arms of her wheelchair, and for a moment, Marcus thought she might refuse. But then, to his surprise, she nodded. "Maybe," she said quietly. "Maybe we could try." And with that small gesture, Marcus knew he had taken the first step in helping Evelyn reclaim a part of her life she thought she had lost forever. The Garden of Hope. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the house feeling a renewed sense of purpose. For weeks, he had approached his work with quiet patience, never expecting immediate results. But yesterday, Evelyn's small gesture, her tentative agreement to work on the garden, felt like a turning point. Marcus knew that progress with her would come in increments, but this felt like a breakthrough. The house, however, greeted him in its usual somber way. The dim entryway was still cloaked in shadows, and the silence was palpable, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Marcus moved quietly through the house, preparing breakfast as he did every morning. As usual, he placed the tray of eggs, toast, and tea on the table beside Evelyn, who, despite her earlier breakthrough, was still staring out of the window, her expression as closed off as ever. He didn't expect a conversation, nor did he press her to eat. The breakthrough wasn't about the garden, he realized. It was about regaining control, however small, over some part of her life. After tidying the kitchen, Marcus walked back into the living room and knelt beside her chair. "I thought maybe we could start with the garden today," he said gently, keeping his tone casual. "I'll bring out some tools and clear away the weeds. Maybe, if you'd like, you could give me some guidance on what you'd like to see done." Evelyn's eyes flickered for a moment, and her hand unconsciously clenched the armrest of her wheelchair. She seemed conflicted, as if fighting an internal battle. Marcus held his breath, hoping he hadn't overstepped. But after what felt like an eternity, she gave a barely perceptible nod. "Fine," she said quietly, her voice devoid of its usual edge. "But don't expect me to be out there all day." Marcus smiled, relieved by her agreement. "Of course, just whenever you feel comfortable." It was late morning when Marcus began clearing the overgrown garden. The thick, tangled mess of weeds had overtaken the once beautiful flower beds. The rose bushes, which Evelyn had mentioned in passing, were choked by vines and thorns. As Marcus worked, he could see glimpses of the garden's former glory. The vibrant flowers that had once bloomed, the carefully laid stone pathways now buried under a carpet of moss. This was not just a garden. It was a reflection of the life Evelyn had lost, the beauty she had cultivated before tragedy struck. As Marcus worked in the warm autumn sun, he kept glancing toward the window, where he knew Evelyn was watching. She sat in her usual spot by the window, her sharp eyes following his movements. Though her face was expressionless, Marcus could sense her interest. It wasn't much, but it was something. By midday, Marcus had made significant progress, and the once wild garden was starting to show signs of life. He had cleared most of the weeds and began trimming the rose bushes, careful not to damage the fragile stems. He had also uncovered a small stone bench, now weathered with age, that had been hidden under a mass of ivy. Marcus wiped the sweat from his brow and stepped back, admiring his work. It was then that he heard the faint sound of the front door creaking open. He turned to see Evelyn slowly wheeling herself onto the back porch, her eyes fixed on the garden. It was the first time he had seen her outside since he had started working for her, and the sight filled him with a quiet sense of accomplishment. "Do you like what I've done so far?" Marcus asked, keeping his tone light and nonchalant. Evelyn didn't answer right away. Her gaze swept over the garden, taking in the changes. For a long moment, she said nothing, and Marcus began to wonder if he had overstepped again. But then her expression softened, and she nodded ever so slightly. "It looks better," she said, her voice barely audible. Marcus smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him. "I thought maybe we could replant some flowers," he suggested. "You could tell me what you used to grow here, and we could bring it back, one step at a time." Evelyn's eyes flickered with something that resembled sadness, but there was also a glimmer of hope. "I used to plant roses, dahlias, and lavender," she said quietly. "The roses were my favorite." Marcus nodded. "We can get new ones," he said. "There's still time before winter sets in. We can have the garden blooming by next spring." Evelyn didn't respond, but the fact that she hadn't dismissed the idea outright felt like another small victory. Marcus continued working for the rest of the afternoon, and though Evelyn didn't join him in the garden, she stayed outside, watching from the porch. It was a start. Over the next few days, Marcus made it a point to engage Evelyn in the process. He would bring gardening catalogs for her to look through and ask her opinion on which flowers to plant. Slowly, and almost imperceptibly, Evelyn began to participate. She would comment on the types of flowers she liked or suggest which parts of the garden needed more attention. Though her input was minimal, it was clear that she was beginning to reconnect with the things that once brought her joy. One afternoon, as Marcus was planting a new row of roses, Evelyn surprised him by asking, "Why do you do this?" Marcus paused, looking up from his work. "Do what?" "This." Evelyn gestured vaguely toward the garden and the house. "Why do you care so much? Why do you keep coming back every day?" Marcus set down his tools and stood up, brushing the dirt from his hands. He took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "Because I believe people deserve to be cared for, no matter what they've been through," he said softly. "I know you've had a lot taken from you, and I can't pretend to know what that feels like. But I believe in helping people find their way back to the things they love." Evelyn didn't respond immediately. Her eyes were fixed on a distant point in the garden, her thoughts seemingly far away. Finally, she spoke, her voice tinged with bitterness. "I don't think you understand, Marcus. There's nothing left for me to go back to. My life ended the day I lost my legs." Marcus felt a lump form in his throat, but he refused to let her words discourage him. "Maybe," he said gently, "but maybe it's not about going back. Maybe it's about finding something new." Evelyn scoffed, but there was a hollowness to the sound. "And what exactly is there for me to find? I'm trapped in this chair, Marcus. My life is over." Marcus knelt beside her wheelchair, his voice steady but filled with quiet conviction. "Your life isn't over, Evelyn. It's changed, yes, but that doesn't mean it's finished. There's still beauty in the world, and there's still purpose in your life. Maybe we just have to find it together." Evelyn didn't respond, but Marcus could see the conflict in her eyes. She was torn between holding on to her pain and allowing herself to hope. It was a battle he knew she had to fight on her own, but he was determined to be there, no matter how long it took. The days passed, and slowly but surely, the garden began to take shape. Marcus worked tirelessly, planting new flowers, trimming the hedges, and restoring the stone pathways. And though Evelyn remained distant, she started to come outside more often, watching from the porch as Marcus worked. Sometimes she would even offer a quiet suggestion or two, pointing out where certain flowers should be planted or which areas needed more attention. It wasn't much, but it was progress. One afternoon, as Marcus was planting a new rose bush, Evelyn spoke up. "You're persistent, aren't you?" Marcus smiled, wiping the sweat from his brow. "I guess you could say that." Evelyn shook her head, a hint of amusement in her voice. "You're different from the others. Most people would have given up by now." Marcus looked at her, his expression soft but serious. "I don't believe in giving up on people, Evelyn. Not when there's still a chance to make things better." Evelyn didn't respond, but the look in her eyes told Marcus that she understood, even if she wasn't ready to admit it. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the garden, Marcus stepped back to admire their progress. The garden was far from finished, but it was already beginning to look like the vibrant, living space it once was. And though Evelyn would never say it, Marcus knew that the garden wasn't the only thing coming back to life. Unveiling layers. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting golden light across the garden, Marcus lost himself in the rhythm of pulling weeds and pruning back overgrown branches. The fresh air was invigorating, and each handful of dirt felt like a small victory. He could almost hear the whispers of the flowers, urging him to bring them back to life. Evelyn watched from her wheelchair, her expression still guarded, but there was a hint of curiosity in her gaze. It was the first time in years she had seen anyone take an interest in the garden, and Marcus hoped she could feel the change in the air. He took breaks now and then, occasionally glancing her way to gauge her reaction. "Do you remember what you had planted here?" he asked, wiping sweat from his brow. "What flowers did you love the most?" She hesitated, as if the question had jolted her from a daydream. "Roses, peonies, and a few wildflowers." Her voice was softer than before, carrying a hint of nostalgia. "I used to spend hours tending to this garden. It was my escape." "Then let's make it your escape again," Marcus encouraged, his tone light but earnest. "We can start small. How about we clear a space for the roses? I can't wait to see them bloom again." Evelyn's eyes softened for a moment, and Marcus felt a warmth spread through him. He resumed his work, and slowly a small smile began to form on her lips. For the first time, he sensed a connection forming, a bridge between their two worlds. As they worked together over the next few days, the garden began to transform, and so did Evelyn. With each passing hour, her defenses lowered just a fraction, allowing Marcus to see glimpses of the woman she used to be. She began sharing stories of summers spent in the garden with her late husband, how they would host picnics under the old oak tree, and the laughter that once filled this house. One afternoon, as they sat together on the patio, surrounded by the fragrant blooms they had nurtured, Evelyn surprised Marcus with a question. "Why do you care so much, Marcus? You could be doing anything else with your time." He paused, the question hanging in the air like the fragrant scent of roses. "I care because I believe everyone deserves a chance to feel seen and valued," he replied thoughtfully. "I've had my struggles too. I know what it's like to feel invisible. But I also know that with support, healing is possible." Evelyn's eyes glistened with something Marcus couldn't quite place. Perhaps it was recognition, or perhaps a long-buried hope. "You really believe that?" she asked softly. "I do," he said, his voice steady. "Life has its challenges, but it also has beauty. Sometimes we just need someone to help us uncover it." As the days turned into weeks, the garden flourished, and so did their relationship. Evelyn started to take an active role, directing Marcus on how to care for the plants she loved. Her laughter, once a rare sound, began to fill the air, mingling with the chirps of birds and the rustle of leaves. They shared stories, meals, and even moments of silence that felt comfortable rather than strained. But just as the garden was blooming, Evelyn's past remained a tangled mess beneath the surface. One day, as they sat in the fading light of dusk, Evelyn's expression turned serious. "Marcus, there's something I need to tell you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. He turned to her, sensing the gravity of her words. "What is it?" Evelyn took a deep breath, her fingers nervously fidgeting with the edge of her sweater. "It's about my life before the accident, before all of this." She paused, her eyes casting downward. "I lost more than my ability to walk. I lost my sense of purpose, my happiness, and my identity." Marcus felt his heart race. "You don't have to share if you're not ready," he said gently. "No, I need to," she insisted, her gaze finally meeting his. "You've shown me kindness I didn't think I deserved. But there's a reason I've been so closed off. I'm scared of what I might lose again if I open up." Marcus nodded, understanding the weight of her vulnerability. "You're safe here, Evelyn. Whatever it is, we can face it together." With those words, Evelyn began to unveil the layers of her life. Her early dreams, her successful career, and the tragic accident that changed everything. As she spoke, Marcus listened intently, recognizing that this was a crucial step in her journey toward healing. He could feel the connection between them deepening, a bond built on trust and shared understanding. But just as she finished her story, her expression shifted, and for the first time, Marcus saw a flicker of doubt cloud her eyes. "Marcus, there's something else," she whispered, reaching into her pocket. She pulled out a small folded piece of paper, her hands trembling. "I've been holding on to this for too long. I think it's time I let it go." As she handed him the note, Marcus felt a surge of anticipation and anxiety. What could this reveal, and how would it shape the future they were beginning to build together? He unfolded the paper slowly, the weight of her past pressing heavily on his heart. "What does it say?" Evelyn asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus looked into her eyes, knowing that whatever was written on that note had the power to change everything. "Let's find out together," he said, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The heart of healing. Evelyn's question lingered in the air, an unexpected challenge that pierced through the comfortable silence of their shared moment. Marcus felt the weight of her gaze, curious yet wary. He took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts before answering. "Honestly," he began, his voice steady but sincere, "I believe everyone deserves to feel seen and valued, no matter their circumstances. When I was growing up, I saw how hard my mother worked to care for others, even when we had little. It inspired me to help people in any way I could." Evelyn's brow furrowed, and Marcus could sense her processing his words. "But it must be exhausting," she replied, her voice still laced with skepticism. "Why not choose an easier path?" "It can be," he admitted, a smile breaking through. "But every time I see someone smile or regain a bit of hope, it feels like all the hard work is worth it. Just like what we're doing here. Watching this garden come back to life is its own reward." Evelyn fell silent, her expression softening. For the first time, Marcus saw a flicker of vulnerability behind her stoic demeanor. She looked out at the garden, her fingers lightly tracing the armrest of her chair, lost in thought. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, Marcus cleaned up the tools scattered around the garden. He glanced at Evelyn, who was still watching the colors change, her face reflecting a myriad of emotions. "Would you like to help me plant something new?" he asked tentatively. "I thought we could add some wildflowers over there." He pointed to a patch of soil that looked eager for life. For a moment, he feared she would refuse, but then she nodded slowly. "All right, let's do it." The next day, Marcus arrived with a selection of wildflower seeds, vibrant packets bursting with color. As he knelt down beside her, he carefully explained each flower's characteristics, its growth habits, and the joy they would bring. Evelyn listened, Her interest peaked as they picked the best spots for each seed. "I used to love wildflowers," she confessed, her voice tinged with nostalgia. "They remind me of my childhood, carefree days spent running through fields, the smell of earth and sunshine. They don't need much care, but they bring so much beauty." Marcus noticed the way her eyes sparkled as she spoke. It was a stark contrast to the guarded woman he had first met. Together, they worked in companionable silence, planting seeds and discussing their favorite colors. Each wildflower represented not just beauty, but also the resilience of life itself. As they finished, Evelyn turned to him with an unexpected seriousness. "Marcus, I want to thank you," she said softly. "You've done more for me than anyone else has in years. You're changing things for me." He met her gaze, feeling the sincerity of her words resonate in his chest. "I'm glad to hear that, Evelyn, but it's really you who's doing the hard work. You're rediscovering parts of yourself, and that's incredible." She smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her face, transforming her features. In that moment, the walls that had surrounded her heart began to crack. For the first time, Marcus felt a surge of hope that they were on the cusp of something profound, a deeper connection that could transcend caregiving. But just as they were about to share a light moment, the tension in the air shifted. Evelyn's expression grew distant, and Marcus could see the shadows creep back into her eyes. I worry it won't last," she admitted, her voice trembling. "What if I retreat back into myself? What if this is just temporary?" "Evelyn," he said, leaning closer, "healing isn't linear. It ebbs and flows. But you've already taken so many brave steps forward. I'm here with you for the long haul, and together we can navigate whatever comes next." She looked at him, uncertainty still flickering across her features, but there was something else too, an inkling of trust. They both knew that the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but for the first time, there was a sense of hope blossoming between them, much like the wildflowers they had just planted. And as evening settled in, the garden stood as a testament to their shared journey, a promise of new beginnings. The note. As the days turned into weeks, the garden transformed into a vibrant tapestry of colors and scents, reflecting the healing taking place within Evelyn herself. The laughter they shared as they planted seeds and watched the blossoms bloom filled the once silent house with a sense of warmth and possibility. Marcus began to notice a subtle change in Evelyn. Her walls were slowly coming down, allowing glimpses of the lively, passionate woman she once was. One crisp morning, while they were tending to the flowers, Evelyn paused and turned to Marcus, her eyes gleaming with an emotion he hadn't seen in a long time: determination. "I want to show you something," she said, her voice steady. "But it might be difficult." Marcus nodded, intrigued yet cautious. "I'm here for whatever you want to share, Evelyn." She wheeled herself toward the back of the house, leading him to a small, secluded area shrouded by towering hedges. As they reached the clearing, Marcus saw an old wooden bench, worn but sturdy, sitting beneath a sprawling willow tree. The sunlight filtered through the branches, creating a mosaic of light and shadow on the ground. "Sit," Evelyn instructed, gesturing to the bench. Marcus complied, sensing the gravity of the moment. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she pulled a small, folded note from her pocket. "This is something I've held onto for a long time," she said, her voice quiet. "I've kept it hidden because it represents a part of my life that I thought was lost forever." She handed him the note, her eyes never leaving his. As Marcus unfolded the paper, he noticed the handwriting was elegant yet shaky, as if written in haste. The note read, "Evelyn, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer there to tell you how much you're loved. Please remember that your spirit is unbreakable, no matter the circumstances. Find a way to forgive yourself and embrace life again. You are stronger than you think." Marcus looked up, meeting Evelyn's gaze. Tears brimmed in her eyes, and he could see the pain etched across her face. "This was from my husband, Daniel," she whispered. "He wrote it before the accident. I found it months later, but I was too lost in my grief to truly understand it. The weight of her revelation hung in the air, and Marcus felt an urge to comfort her. Evelyn, this is powerful. He wanted you to live, to find joy again. I thought I could never forgive myself for surviving when he didn't, she replied, her voice thick with emotion. I pushed everyone away, convinced that I didn't deserve happiness. But I think I've been wrong. Marcus felt a rush of compassion. You're not just surviving, you're living again. Look at the garden, look at how it flourishes under your care. It's a testament to your strength. Evelyn took a deep breath, her eyes searching his, as if seeking reassurance. Do you really believe that? I do, he replied earnestly. You've brought so much life back into this space and into yourself. It's never too late to embrace the beauty around you. In the days that followed, Evelyn seemed lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. She began to share more stories of her life before the accident, recalling the joy she found in art and music, the laughter of friends, and the small moments that had once filled her heart with joy. One afternoon, while planting the last of the wildflowers, she turned to Marcus and said, I want to host a garden party, a celebration of new beginnings. Would you help me organize it? Marcus's face lit up with excitement. Absolutely. We can invite friends, neighbors, anyone who can appreciate this beautiful space. Evelyn smiled, the warmth in her expression illuminating her face. It's time to bring life back into this house. With that, they set to work, planning the party together. As they hung twinkling lights and arranged tables with colorful linens, Marcus could see the spark of life returning to Evelyn's eyes. She was becoming the woman she once was, and he felt honored to be part of her journey. As the date of the party approached, a sense of anticipation filled the air. The garden had become a sanctuary of hope, and Evelyn's spirit was blossoming along with it. They worked tirelessly, preparing every detail, from the food to the decorations, excited for what lay ahead. But amidst the preparations, Evelyn's past still loomed. In quiet moments, Marcus could see the shadows of her grief creeping back. He knew that healing wasn't linear. It had its ups and downs. And with the party approaching, he hoped it would be the catalyst she needed to fully embrace her life again. As they sat together one evening, exhausted from their preparations, yet buzzing with excitement, Evelyn turned to Marcus. You've changed my life in ways I didn't think were possible, she said softly. Thank you for not giving up on me. Marcus felt a swell of emotion. I'm just getting to know the real you, and I can't wait for others to see it too. With that, they clinked their glasses of lemonade, a toast to new beginnings, hope, and the promise of tomorrow. Little did they know, the party would become a turning point, not just for Evelyn, but for both of them in ways they couldn't yet imagine. A new chapter. Evelyn's voice trembled as she continued. I found it months later, but I never had the courage to face it. I let my grief consume me. After the accident, everything changed. I pushed everyone away, convinced that I didn't deserve love or joy anymore. Marcus felt the weight of her words. He understood that this moment was pivotal, not just for Evelyn, but for both of them. Evelyn, he said gently, you've shown so much strength in reclaiming your garden, and in allowing me to be a part of your life. What your husband wrote is a reminder that you are still here, and it's okay to embrace life again. Evelyn's eyes shimmered with unshed tears as she absorbed his words. I've spent years trapped in my own sorrow, hiding from the world, she confessed. I didn't know how to move forward without Daniel. But now, it feels like I'm finally starting to awaken from a long sleep. Marcus nodded, understanding the enormity of what she was expressing. Healing takes time, and it's okay to take it one step at a time. You've already taken so many steps just by allowing yourself to feel again. As the sunlight filtered through the willow's branches, they sat together in silence, the air filled with unspoken hopes and newfound possibilities. Evelyn finally took a deep breath, wiping her tears with a small smile that broke through her usual reserve. Thank you for being patient with me, Marcus. I can't believe how much you've changed things here. "It's not just me," he replied, returning her smile. "You've done all the hard work. Your willingness to engage with the world again is what makes the difference." Over the next few weeks, Evelyn continued to open up. They shared stories about their lives, their hopes, and their fears, slowly creating a bond that felt both fragile and strong. One afternoon, as they pruned the roses together, Evelyn mentioned wanting to host a small gathering in the garden, something she hadn't done in years. "I used to love hosting," she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "I would invite friends over for tea and tell them about all the flowers I was growing. I want to do that again." "Absolutely," Marcus exclaimed, feeling a rush of joy at her enthusiasm. "Let's invite some neighbors and make it special. You could showcase all the flowers we've cultivated together." Evelyn's smile widened, and for the first time, Marcus saw a glimpse of the vibrant woman she once was. "I'll need your help, of course. I want everything to be perfect." Marcus chuckled. "Of course. I'll be your partner in this. We can plan a menu, set up the seating, and I'll even help with the decorations." As they began to plan the gathering, the garden became more than just a project. It was a symbol of their journey together. Evelyn's transformation was palpable, and with each passing day, the house felt more alive, echoing with laughter and light. On the day of the gathering, the garden was a riot of color, filled with the fragrant blooms they had nurtured. Tables were set with cheerful cloths, and delicate lanterns hung from the branches of the trees. Evelyn wore a dress that she hadn't touched in years, a flowing floral number that swirled around her wheelchair, a stark contrast to the somber attire she had worn before. As the first guests arrived, Marcus stood by her side, feeling a mix of pride and joy. Evelyn greeted each person with warmth, her laughter ringing out like music. For the first time, she appeared genuinely happy, fully engaged in the moment. Throughout the afternoon, as friends mingled and shared stories, Marcus noticed the glow in Evelyn's eyes, the way she radiated joy. It was as if the garden had not only revived the flowers, but had also breathed life back into her spirit. As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden hue over the gathering, Evelyn turned to Marcus, her expression full of gratitude. "Thank you, Marcus, for everything. I couldn't have done this without you." Marcus felt a swell of emotion at her words. "You did this, Evelyn. You took the brave step to open yourself up again. I'm just glad to have been here to witness it." As twilight settled in, the garden became a sanctuary of warmth and connection. Evelyn realized that while the note from Daniel had opened a door to her past, it was her newfound friendship with Marcus that was helping her step boldly into her future. The night ended with laughter, heartfelt conversations, and a renewed sense of hope, weaving a tapestry of memories that would guide Evelyn on her journey of healing. As Marcus helped Evelyn clean up, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something extraordinary. They had each found a new purpose, one rooted in resilience, compassion, and the beauty of transformation. And as they stood together in the moonlit garden, the future seemed bright, full of promise, waiting for them to embrace it. The gathering. The day of the gathering arrived, heralded by a gentle breeze that whispered through the trees and carried the sweet fragrance of blooming flowers. Marcus had arrived early, eager to help Evelyn set the stage for what he hoped would be a transformative afternoon. The garden, now a riot of colors, felt alive, and he wanted it to reflect the renewed spirit that had blossomed within Evelyn. "Let's start with the tables," Marcus suggested, directing her attention to the rustic wooden tables they had cleaned and set up on the patio. He placed cheerful pastel tablecloths over them, each adorned with fresh bouquets of roses and wildflowers they had carefully arranged. Evelyn, in her wheelchair, directed the setup with a newfound confidence. "Make sure the flowers are at different heights," she instructed. "It creates depth." Her keen eye for design, once buried beneath layers of sorrow, shone through. Marcus couldn't help but admire her enthusiasm. It was contagious, sparking a joy that spread between them like sunlight. As the guests began to arrive, a mix of excitement and anxiety washed over Evelyn. She had spent so long isolating herself that the thought of reconnecting felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Marcus stayed close, offering reassuring smiles and words of encouragement as friends from her past stepped into the garden, some hesitantly, others with open arms. Evelyn, Claire, her college roommate, exclaimed as she rushed forward. "It's been ages. This place looks incredible." Claire enveloped Evelyn in a warm hug, the kind that spoke of years gone by and memories cherished. Evelyn's expression softened, and Marcus saw the walls she had built begin to crumble. "Thank you, Claire. It's really wonderful to see you again," she replied, her voice steady yet filled with emotion. As more guests trickled in, laughter and chatter filled the air, mingling with the scent of freshly baked scones and the bright notes of herbal tea. Marcus moved through the crowd, serving drinks and finger sandwiches, feeling a swell of pride at what they had accomplished together. He caught snippets of conversations, stories of old adventures and shared experiences. Each interaction seemed to bring Evelyn further out of her shell, her laughter ringing out like music, infectious and heartfelt. As the afternoon wore on, Marcus took a moment to step back and observe the scene. Evelyn was at the center of it all. Her friends gathered around her, reminiscing and sharing anecdotes that sparked joy. For the first time in years, she looked truly alive, her eyes sparkling, her smile radiant. But as the sun began to dip towards the horizon, casting a golden hue over the garden, Evelyn grew quiet, her gaze drifting towards the vibrant blooms. Marcus approached her, sensing a shift. "Everything okay?" he asked softly. Evelyn turned to him, her expression contemplative. "I've missed this, being around people, sharing joy. It feels surreal." She took a deep breath, the weight of unspoken thoughts lingering in the air. "But I also feel a sense of loss. Daniel should have been here." Marcus nodded, understanding the complexity of her emotions. "It's natural to feel that way. But today is also about honoring what you've built. He would be proud to see you surrounded by friends, embracing life again." Evelyn smiled gently, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you, Marcus. You've been more than just a caregiver to me. You've helped me rediscover myself." Before he could respond, Claire approached, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "Evelyn, you absolutely must tell everyone about that hilarious story from college, the one with the pranks during finals." Laughter erupted as Evelyn recounted the tale, her voice gaining strength with each word. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, the garden transformed into a place of warmth and connection. It was a celebration not just of flowers but of resilience, friendship, and the healing power of community. As the gathering wound down, Evelyn turned to Marcus, her heart full. "I can't thank you enough for helping me take this step," she said, her voice sincere. "You've brought back a piece of me that I thought was lost forever." Marcus smiled back, knowing this was just the beginning of their journey together. "You did all the hard work, Evelyn. You opened the door, I just helped you walk through it." In that moment, surrounded by laughter and the beauty of their transformed garden, Evelyn felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps she could embrace life fully again, with all its complexities, and allow herself to heal. As the stars began to twinkle overhead, she knew that her story was far from over. It was just entering a new chapter, one filled with promise and possibility. A turning point. As the sun began its descent, casting a golden hue over the garden, the gathering took on a life of its own. Evelyn shone in her element, moving from group to group, her laughter intertwining with the chatter around her. For Marcus, watching her embrace her friends was a profound reminder of the strength that lay within her, a strength that had been buried under layers of grief and isolation for far too long. At one point, as he was serving tea, Marcus overheard Claire ask, "So, Evelyn, what's next for you? Any big plans now that you're back in the swing of things?" The question hung in the air, a gentle challenge that Evelyn seemed to take to heart. Marcus watched as Evelyn hesitated, her smile faltering for just a moment. Then, with a determined glint in her eyes, she replied, "I've been thinking about hosting regular gatherings, a way to reconnect with my community, to share this space, and perhaps even my love for gardening." The guests responded with enthusiastic nods and cheers, and Marcus felt a swell of pride. It was a small step, but a significant one, signaling her readiness to reclaim her life. He could see the energy in her, as if the garden itself had breathed new life into her spirit. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the lawn, Evelyn gathered her friends around for a toast. "I want to thank you all for being here today," she said, her voice clear and strong. "It's been too long since I've felt this alive. You've reminded me that I'm not alone, and that life is meant to be shared." Marcus's heart swelled with emotion as he watched her. This moment was a testament to her resilience and the bonds of friendship that had weathered time and distance. He raised his glass, joining in the toast, feeling as if he were part of something beautiful and transformative. After the toast, the conversation turned to lighter topics, filled with laughter and playful banter. Marcus found himself drawn into the circle of friends, sharing stories of his childhood and the challenges he faced growing up. The atmosphere was electric, filled with warmth and camaraderie, as they all exchanged memories and dreams. As the evening progressed, the sun dipped below the horizon, leaving a tapestry of stars to illuminate the sky. Evelyn turned to Marcus, her eyes shining with gratitude. "I can't thank you enough for everything you've done, Marcus. I didn't think I could ever feel this way again." "You did this, Evelyn," he replied earnestly. "You took the leap. I'm just glad I could be here to support you." As the gathering began to wind down, guests started to say their goodbyes, promising to return for the next get-together. Evelyn watched them leave, a sense of fulfillment washing over her. She turned to Marcus, her expression softening. "I think I'm ready for more than just gardening. It's time for me to truly live again." The weight of her words hung in the air, a profound acknowledgement of her journey thus far. Marcus smiled, knowing that the road ahead would have its challenges, but for the first time, Evelyn seemed ready to embrace whatever came next. Together, they cleaned up the remnants of the gathering, laughter and light-hearted banter echoing through the garden as they reminisced about the day. The shadows of the evening deepened around them, but within the embrace of the blooming flowers, a new chapter was just beginning. As they finished tidying up, Evelyn reached for Marcus's arm. "I want to share something with you," she said, her voice steady but laced with anticipation. "I've been working on something in my mind for a while now, and I think it's time to bring it to life." Marcus raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What is it?" Evelyn took a deep breath, her gaze focused on the horizon, where the last rays of sunlight faded. "I want to start a community gardening project, something that can bring people together, heal wounds, and celebrate life. I believe everyone deserves a place to grow, just like these flowers." The vision took Marcus by surprise, yet it resonated deeply within him. "That's an incredible idea. We can get the community involved, host workshops, and teach others about gardening. It could become a sanctuary for so many." Evelyn smiled, her eyes alight with excitement. "I know it won't be easy, but I want to create a space where people can share their stories, their struggles and their triumphs, just like we did today." As they stood there under the twinkling stars, the possibilities stretched out before them like the open sky. This was more than just a project. It was a chance for Evelyn to weave her own narrative back into the fabric of life, to find purpose and connection in a world that had once felt so isolating. "Let's make it happen," Marcus said with conviction, feeling the energy between them shift and deepen. Together. In that moment, both knew they were embarking on a journey that would not only change Evelyn's life, but also ripple through the community, touching the lives of many. As they stood side by side in the garden that had become a symbol of rebirth, they realized that hope could blossom in the most unexpected places, nurturing growth that could withstand even the harshest of storms.